My name is... What? My name is... Who? My name is... Chicka Slim Shady. Gosh, how do I have friends? I don't know. Hi, my name is Cara. I like music, I like films, and today we're going to talk about both. Such a great song. Well, hello there. It's been a minute, hasn't it? Life goes by so fast when you're wasting it. Okay. Today we're going to go back in time and then fast forward into the present, which is now the past, and then it will be even longer since by the time you watch this. So, I assume you've seen the title, and unless you are terribly mistaken, you're watching this on purpose. Thank you. Now let's talk about Cruella. About a month ago, I met some of my friends whom I hadn't seen in ages, and we went to the movies to see the newest Disney movie, Cruella. It felt very much like being back in high school and was fan-freaking-tastic. So anyway, me and my friends all have sort of the same age, and that means we grew up watching the same movies and listening to the same music. Ish. Naturally, we were all familiar with the movie 101 Dalmatians, which is a Disney classic, and we all knew who Cruella De Vil was. But let me give you a little backstory first. The character of Cruella De Vil first appeared in a book called The Grey Dog Robbery, written by Dodie Smith in the late 50s. But then the title was changed to 101 Dalmatians, and shortly after that, in 1961, it featured in the Disney animated movie 101 Dalmatians. The story is about the kidnapping of a ton of baby Dalmatians and how the parents of the puppies, Pungo and Mrs., go on an adventure to rescue their litter of puppies from the people who stole them. Now, the owners of Pungo and Mrs., whose names I don't remember and I couldn't be bothered to look for them, happen to know Cruella because I think they went to school together or something, and Cruella is this very, very wealthy woman who's obsessed with fashion. More specifically, she's obsessed with fur clothing, which explains why she gets so obsessed with fur coats and Dalmatian fur. But like any other rich person, nothing will ever be enough to satisfy her. Due to some circumstances, she learns about the Dalmatian puppies that I mentioned earlier, and she wants to buy them to turn them into a coat. But the owners, who shall not be named, don't want to sell them, and so she hires a man to steal them, thus the kidnapping. And, you know, a bunch of other things happen when Pungo and Mrs. go in search of their puppies, but you'd have to see the movie if you're interested in that. And if you haven't, I mean, why? It's a classic. But anyway, what's interesting is that Cruella became a very successful character, and for decades she has been known as one of Disney's most evil characters of all time. She even appears in the American Film Institute's list of the 100 greatest heroes and villains, alongside characters like Hannibal Lecter, Freddy Krueger, and the Joker. And I mean, her name just have cruel and devil in it. And she even has an anthem that says, if she doesn't scare you, no evil thing will. Well, she looked scary, alright? I mean, you have the cute puppies and the regular sweet-looking Disney characters, and then boom, there's Cruella. In the animated film, we don't really learn much about her past. Very few things are mentioned, so when this new adaptation came out, I didn't know what to expect. It was obviously going to be focused on Cruella alone, and I assumed that some of the other characters from 101 Dalmatians were going to be mentioned at one point, but I couldn't imagine how they were going to portray her. The Cruella I grew up knowing was not a tragic person by any means. She didn't have a sad or an awful experience growing up, and she seemed to own her evilness, you know? She was very self-absorbed, and she really only cared about herself. She kind of reminds me a bit of Cersei Lannister, to be honest. And so that's who I remembered, the crazy-looking, super stylish woman who wanted to skin Dalmatian dogs in order to make a coat out of them. She was scary, unapologetic, and just cruel. Which I think might be why she became so popular. Like, she didn't mind being the evil one. In fact, I dare say she loved it, and people loved her for it. But as far as the new storyline goes, we learn about Stella, aka Cruella, a little girl with black and white hair who is problematic since birth and has two different personalities, one as Stella and the other one as Cruella. And very quickly into the movie, which is 2 hours and 15 minutes long, she loses her mum in an accident and then flees to London, where she has to hide from the authorities because she's now an orphan, and if they capture her, she'll be taken to an orphanage. Obviously. Once in London, she meets a couple of equally orphan kids, Horace and Jasper, and they begrudgingly accept her as part of the gang. In the original story, Horace and Jasper were the henchmen that she hires to steal the Dalmatians, but in this adaptation, they grow up being friends, and they eventually become sort of like a family. And for a while, we only know Stella, this poor girl who lost her mother, blames herself for it, and dreams of being a fashion designer, but by all means, she's a nobody. And it's not until one of her friends manages to get her a job that puts her on a path to her dream job that we start to see glimpses of Cruella. But by this point and onwards, we start to get closer to the great villain she will become, things have been pretty unfamiliar. And for a character as popular as Cruella, I was wondering how they were going to convince the public that this tragic backstory was worth telling. And moreover, how are they going to keep people entertained long enough to get to the point of revealing Cruella in all her splendor? And I think I know how they did it. It's all about the music. Since the very beginning of a film, we hear music most of the time, and the complete soundtrack of a film includes over 60 songs. Some are part of the soundtrack, obviously, and others are part of the original score. Now, if you don't know the difference between a soundtrack and a film score, I made a whole video about it, and you can find the link to it in the description box below. In a nutshell, a film score refers to the original music composed specifically for a film or any other project, whereas a soundtrack is a list of pre-existing songs that are used in a film. Cruella does have an original film score that was composed by Nicholas Britell, but Disney has a bit of a reputation for having some great scores. You know, we can think of Up, The Incredibles, or Inside Out. So the decision to have such a prominent soundtrack must have been deliberate. I mean, if we take a look at some of the songs from this long list, they curated a rather cool playlist that does more than accompany the story. First of all, it gives us a clear sense of time and place. The story takes place in London in the 1970s during the punk rock movement, and the compilation of songs is filled with rock, R&B, pop, and punk hit songs from the 60s and the 70s, mostly by British musicians. We hear songs from bands like The Animals, The Zombies, Supertramp, and The Rolling Stones. But when it comes to solving the problematic of this unfamiliar story, other hit songs are used to make us feel more comfortable and perhaps a tad more receptive to the story. Hit singles like These Boots Are Made for Walking by Nancy Sinatra, Feeling Good by Nancy Simone, Stone Cold Crazy by Queen, and Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash are part of the soundtrack. But other big artists like David Bowie, Blondie, The Bee Gees, Doris Day, Judy Garland, Black Sabbath, and Florence and the Machine are also included. And I believe that this list of super popular, easily recognizable songs is what brings it all together. Yes, we have a narrative that's easy to follow with plot twists that are kind of expected. It's just pretty much the usual backstory that aims to make people empathize with the character, especially if that character is the bad guy. And it also gives us a way to justify the evilness that now we see as a result of the tragedies that this character went through. Now, don't get me wrong, the original score is pretty good and I quite liked it, but it does very little for the story. And it would be naive to think that a story like this, a new story for a character that's been around for over 60 years, and for which you only have 2 hours to be convinced that this could have actually happened, could rely exclusively on the narrative and the visual aspects. I'm not saying that an original score couldn't be written, but if we have an unfamiliar story, unfamiliar characters, and unfamiliar music for 2 hours, no matter how good it all is, people are going to get bored very quickly. After all, we were there to see Cruella De Vil, not Stella, the fashion designer who loses it and goes mad. And what better way to convince us of the credibility of this story than by using the powerful familiarity and legitimacy of the music that we hear at every turn, and that, much like Cruella, has been around for ages. One last thing the music does is reflect the tone of the movie, and in some occasions the behavior or the thinking behind what the characters are doing. There's a great scene where Stella decides to go full on Cruella and take down the Baroness, which is this new character who's basically the antagonist, and she essentially rebels against who she was in this fabulous montage of smashing outfits and performances. And throughout the whole scene we hear the song One Way or Another by Blondie as a kind of underlying threat that Cruella will crush the Baroness at some point, one way or another. So yeah, I suppose all things considered, this movie was pretty good. The costumes were definitely fantastic, and I very much liked Emma Stone's work both as Stella and Cruella. And whether you like the idea of Cruella having a tragic past or being shamelessly evil, this is an iconic character, and now with a few versions to choose from, you can pick whichever you like. Have her one way or another. Ha, that's cheesy. Well, that's it. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope you liked the video, but if you didn't, tough luck. If you're not subscribed yet, you can do it now. It's very simple, it's free. You have to click a big red button like the ones they tell us not to push unless it's an emergency, and that just makes us want to push it even harder. That's cheesy. Or you can leave a thumbs up or a comment and let the almighty YouTube algorithm know that you liked my video, and that'd be pretty cool too. Anyway, thanks again, take care, and you'll see me until next time. Bye. Powerful familiarity. What the f— Don't forget to hydrate.